Welcome to another 126 Collective. We got a sparse crowd today, but you know what? Whoever is here is who's supposed to be here. I normally like to try to send out an email to everybody that's registered the morning of. But if you have followed any of, because I did send an email yesterday, I'm on the road. And so, interestingly enough, we are in our RV. We're headed to Yellowstone. That's our first stop, but we'll be there not till the end of the week. So we're making slow go of it. We spent last night in Cordele, Georgia, and this morning made it through Atlanta and found this beautiful park in Ackworth, Georgia. So if you're ever in the Ackworth, Georgia area, which is north of Atlanta, check out Ackworth because it's beautiful. Apparently, it used to be unaffectionately called Crackworth, but the community came together, they've cleaned everything up, and now it's got a beautiful park. And we found this great coffee shop where they graciously allowed me to set up and work here. I thought my husband hooked up the Starlink and I thought we're going to be all set to go, but you would be looking at the back seat of my pickup truck right now. So it's much better to have this coffee shop view. You can't really see, but there's like some birds up there on the wall. And hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm on my headset today. But we're going to dive in and talk about Nehemiah. So, Nehemiah is the leader that I chose this week for so many reasons. And hopefully, you guys got the handout, but there is a ton of additional information that I didn't include on the handout that I'm going to give you guys as we go along here. But Nehemiah lived in 445 BC. So I'll set the scene. Um, Babylon has taken over Israel, taken over Jerusalem. They burned the temple to the ground, and the Israelites had been living in exile for more than 100 years. And so Babylon, which was King Nebuchadnezzar, who's undoubtedly one of the most evil people who ever lived, um, has now been overthrown by Persia. So Babylon is overthrown by Persia, and King Artaxerxes is the king. He is actually favorable to the Jews, and in fact has decided that people can, follow whatever religion they choose. So Nehemiah is the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. That sort of sets the scene. And so, what I want us to think about today is how do leaders react to problems? Because if you've led at any level, whether it's your business, family, community, your church, your neighborhood, your kids' baseball team, you know that problems are inevitable. Problems are inevitable, and there's one way to know you're alive. You got a problem, and so we all have problems. Tony Robbins says the goal is to have higher quality problems, but we want to look today at how Nehemiah and how we as leaders can react to problems. So what I'm suggesting is that great leaders don't just react to problems. They actually seek direction, they develop a plan, and then they inspire others to join them. So we're going to talk a lot about leadership and in particular level 4 leadership, which you guys have heard me talk about numerous times. So, um, this is Nehemiah. Remember, he's living about 120 years after the Babylonian invasion, and so he's never been to Jerusalem. He's living still under the orders of Persia. So they're not really free. But one, I did some research on what Nehemiah would have been as the cupbearer, and you may already know this, but the cupbearer is kind of like the wine taster. So he's not only in charge of pouring the wine for the king and then testing it to make sure there's no poison in it. Um, most um, eras where there have been kings and queens that rule, there's always somebody who has to taste the food, taste the wine, because people are always trying to poison the king and queen. So it was more than that, though. He was really the house manager. So he was in charge of all water, wine, and all of that. And he had the ear of the king, right? You would have to have been very trustworthy in order to have the role of the chief cupbearer. And so that's what Nehemiah was. But he's never been to Jerusalem. Now, at this point, two waves of exiles have been allowed to go back to Israel, back to Jerusalem. But at this point, the temple has not been rebuilt. So, um, So Nehemiah finds out from one of these as these waves of Israelites go back to Jerusalem to try to resettle the land and rebuild their homes, and rebuild the temple. Some of them trickle back to Persia, and deliver news of what they've seen. And so that's where Nehemiah comes in. So, so I'm starting with the law of navigation. And the law of navigation, this is John Maxwell's one of his 21 laws of irrefutable leadership. 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, excuse me. It says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. And so I think Nehemiah demonstrates this beautifully. And so we're going to go through some of the scripture today so I could kind of walk you through how did I come to that conclusion? How is this the law that I chose to focus on with Nehemiah when, as you'll see, I think he represents many of the leadership laws. So I'm going to start in the book of Nehemiah, which is in the Old Testament, chapter 2, and this is verses 17 through 18. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. And so this is after, and I'm sort of going to go back and then I'm going to jump ahead, but this is after Nehemiah has learned about the city walls, which still lie in ruins. And he's now speaking to the people there in Persia, the Jews, some of the priests, and some of the other leaders in the Jewish community to try to get them to understand the importance of going back to rebuild the walls. And so, yes, the walls were there. A city without walls is in great danger, and a nation without walls is in great danger of invasion. And so, this is why it was important for him to go back and rebuild the walls. So, I want to kind of dive into some of the leadership principles from Nehemiah. And the first one, and let me go ahead and I'll share my screen here. And the first one I want to talk about is great leaders own the problem before they lead the solution. So now I'm going to back up a little bit to Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So this group of Israelites who has gone back to Jerusalem and has learned of the condition there are coming back and explaining to Nehemiah what's going on there. So there were some Israelites that escaped the Babylonian invasion. And so in order for them to survive, they sort of had to integrate themselves into the people groups around them. Well, and we've talked about this before, a lot of those people groups did not follow Yahweh. They followed false gods. And so they engaged in all sorts of detestable practices like burning their children, sacrificing their children alive, engaging in sexual immorality, idol worship, all of those things. So a lot of the Jews who somehow escaped the original exile have now become like the people around them. Right. So our parents weren't wrong when they said we're known by the company we keep, right? We become like the people we surround ourselves with. And we talked about that in other leadership lessons as well. And so they've come back. These guys have come back and explained to Nehemiah what's going on. And as soon as he hears about it, he just starts weeping. And why would he fast and pray? Well, because these are his people. And so he didn't distance himself from the problem. Look, Nehemiah's got a cushy job. He's the cupbearer for the king. He could have easily just said, hey, that's on you guys. You want to go back and try to rebuild Jerusalem? Go for it. Leave me out of it. I got a cushy job here with the king. I'm not going to get involved. And I think everyone's had an experience where you've been challenged to decide, are you going to get involved or are you not? But he didn't do it. And that's what a leader does. They step into it, they move towards the problem, not run away from it. And so great leaders don't ignore difficult realities, they lean into them. And that's exactly what Nehemiah did. And he decided he was going to own this problem. And he did that. We know because the Bible says that he began to mourn and fast and weep and pray. And so he is there on his knees confessing the sins of his people. So great leaders don't ignore difficult realities, they lean into them. And so I want to talk about how this can show up for us as leaders. So we don't need to wait for someone else to solve these critical issues. If you want to be a better leader, you got to recognize the problem early. Tony Robbins says that losers react and leaders anticipate, right? So we as leaders need to be able to anticipate problems. Now, by the way, you're not going to do that effectively unless you're constantly staying in tune with what's going on in your business, in your industry, in your company, and on your team. Right? That's how you do it. I work with a lot of real estate professionals, and it's so easy to just put your nose down and your head down and just keep focusing on selling homes and not paying attention to the broader industry around them. We talk about the life cycle of business. And so I encourage my clients to look, where is your business? Where is the company that you're affiliated with? Or maybe it's your company. Where is your industry? Right? And then where is the larger industry? And so we kind of look to see that when you stay in tune with what's going on. I'm not saying get distracted by those things, but stay in tune with that. You begin to anticipate problems before they even come up. So then you got to take ownership and then you got to think strategically about solutions. So whether you're leading your business or an organization, your church, your family, whatever it might be, leadership begins when responsibility replaces indifference. And sometimes it can be challenging to remember that you got to stay engaged. Because, and look, I'm not talking about getting involved in coffee pot issues, in minutia, in distractions, in politics, none of those things. But it is your responsibility, whatever your business is. I work with business owners kind of across the board, if you will, and regardless of the industry, I encourage my clients to stay abreast of what's going on. None of us wants to wake up and find ourselves in the middle of a problem. We want to be able to anticipate, not just react. So we got to stop asking who should fix this and start asking how can I help move this forward? There's a pastor that I follow in Jacksonville, Florida. His church is called the Church of 1122. His name is Joby Martin. If you've never heard Joby preach, do yourself a favor, go on YouTube, check him out. He's a powerful teacher, very entertaining, but very real and down to earth. And Joby will say that oftentimes people will come up to him after a church service and say, you know what we need? We need. And he says, my favorite response to them is this: hey, Scooter, if we need it, why aren't you the one starting it? And so that's what a leader does. A leader doesn't say, hey, this is somebody needs to do something. A leader needs to say, what can I do to move this forward? So let's look at leadership principle number 2, and that is preparation creates the confidence to lead. Preparation. So how do preparation and confidence go together? Well, let's see. So now I'm going to Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 4 through 11, picking up sort of where I left off. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes be open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. That happened. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcast are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. And this is exactly what Nehemiah is trying to help accomplish, returning them to the land that God had chosen for them. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. And moving on to Nehemiah 2. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, so now Nehemiah's gone to the king. So he's confessed all of this to the Lord. He's asked for God to put his hand to guide him. And now he goes to the king. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted to me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. So Nehemiah went to the key influencer, right? First, he went to God. First, he noticed what the problem was. He took ownership of it. He felt that call to do something. And then he went to God. He prayed, he fasted, he mourned, he wept, and then he went to God with his plan. But he asked God to bless his plan. Now, we could talk a lot about what that looks like in our lives. A lot of times, I don't know about you, I like to make the plan and then I go bring the plan to God and say, can you just give me that seal of approval so I can carry it forward? But let's let's hope for a moment that what Nehemiah saw as a need was simply in response to what he knew his people had once had, which was an intact city with a beautiful temple where people gathered together from all over the nations and the tribes of Israel to come and worship Yahweh there. And what Nehemiah wanted was to restore that, which God promised. Okay. But anyway, I guess that's another topic for another day. Um, so he approached the key influencer. So before I move on, I just want you to kind of think like, who is a key influencer in your life? Someone that has something that you need, someone that has some advice, some wisdom, something, a favor, someone that could make a connection for you, introduce you to someone. I want you to be thinking about that because um, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. That's what John Maxwell says, and I believe it's true. And influence is the ability to affect the thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and actions of other people for the greater good, right? If that's what influence is, then you got to figure out who are the key influencers in your life that may be able to help you move your business, your plan, or your team along. So, kind of be thinking about that. It's going to be part of your challenge. So, Nehemiah didn't react emotionally or impulsively. So, let's look at what he did. Okay. He prepared. He prepared. It's funny, I had a client call this morning. We talked about um, why this client wasn't getting more referrals from the businesses that they were consistently referring. So this particular client is a real estate professional and they have a team. And so I asked them, you are constantly referring business to plumbers and roofers and AC contractors and grass cutters, like you name it. A realtor is going to have to be able to refer business to lots of different business partners. How many referrals do you get in return? How often do those businesses try to help you? And the answer was pretty much none. And so they questioned why. Why don't they give us referrals? And I said, well, have you ever asked? Have you trained? Of course, the answer is no, because they're so busy just reacting to the business that's in front of them that when a problem arises, they want to refer an AC guy and then move along, assuming that the AC guys are going to take care of the problem and they can go focus on something else. So this isn't a slam against my clients or you if that's you, but it is to indicate that most of the time we don't prepare. We don't take time to sit down and prepare. We have to carve out time in our calendars to be able to step away from working in the business so that we can work on the business. So I help them structure an entire system around what it would look like for them to have a different set of expectations with their business partners and how they actually would train those people. Um, I'm very excited about how this is going to show up for them. So I'll keep you posted. But this is what Nehemiah did. He spent significant time preparing before he even went to King Artaxerxes. So when the opportunity came, he had these four things. Number one, he had a clear vision. You're not going to get a clear vision if you're just flying by the seat of your pants. You're not going to have a clear vision if you're not taking time away from your business to think about your business. Number two, he had a realistic plan, a plan. I teach a business planning clinic for real estate and real estate adjacent professionals, usually a couple times a year in the fall. And that clinic, it's my business planning clinic, by the way, is online. If you're on this, you're a part of my Mighty Network. You have access to that. You can watch it on demand. I think it's 6 different modules. All the handouts are there. You could watch that at any time if you're a real estate professional or real estate adjacent. So maybe a mortgage lender, insurance agent. I think that most everything that I have there would apply to you. But this is it's about creating a plan. That's what I teach. Number three, he had a timeline. And number four, he had a list of resources that he would need. Notice he didn't just go to Artaxerxes and ask if he could leave, if he could take a leave of absence to go work on the wall. He was actually bold enough to not only ask him if he could leave, but ask him for a letter of passage so that he could move through other lands without getting stopped, right? He could cross those borders easily. And he had enough gumption to ask for trees, for timber to help him rebuild the city walls. And you got to think about this. You're the king of Persia. Why are you going to let one of your one of your servants, if you will, go and rebuild walls? What are walls for around cities? They're for protection. They're for protection. So he's already allowed the Jews to go back. They're rebuilding their homes. They've rebuilt the temple. Now he's going to let them build walls. And not only that, he's going to give him the timber to do it. Like this is kind of mind blowing. But this is what happens when you prepare. When you prepare. So Nehemiah's preparation allowed him to act decisively when the moment arrived. When the moment arrived. And this is John Maxwell's the law of timing. The law of timing. When is as important as what. So, what's our application here? Well, if you want to be a successful leader, you're not improvising your biggest decisions. You got to gather your information. You got to anticipate those challenges, like we talked about before. You got to think strategically, and then you got to prepare thoroughly, all before you take action. I'm not saying there's never a time when you don't have to react, right? I don't know about what business you were in 2020. But even my business as a coach, I there was no way I was prepared for COVID. And at that time, almost all of my clients were real estate agents. Um, if you guys remember, at least for a few weeks, months. I don't think in Florida it was months, but at least for a few weeks, nobody could do anything. So I had to react. So did they. By the way, thankfully, a majority of my real estate clients were in Florida, and very quickly, realtors were deemed necessary, so they got to go back to work. But we all had to try to figure out what to do. But that was a hopefully once in a lifetime event. But to be a great leader, you're not just improvising. You're not improvising. Even though you might have to pivot sometimes, uh, hopefully you're not just improvising. So preparation builds credibility because people naturally trust leaders who know where they're going. I'm reading Walter Isaacson's biography on Elon Musk right now. Fascinating, by the way. It's about 700 pages. I don't know if you've ever read Walter Isaacson. I've read a couple of his biographies in the past. One he did on Da Vinci, and the one he did on Steve Jobs. He's an incredible writer, but he follows Elon around for 2 years, has free reign to talk to everybody, including all his exes, his parents, and everybody. And so I'm only, gosh, I'm only a little bit into this 700-page book, but Elon Musk is a unicorn because he does a lot of thinking about things. He's obviously, if you know anything about him, you know he's a genius, but he does sort of have a personality that can rub people the wrong way. And part it's because he has a version of Asperger's, which makes it difficult for him to read social cues. And so sometimes he just, like a bull in a china shop, goes head first into something. He said, let's blow up as many rockets as it takes to get it right. But that's a unicorn, guys. That's not how most great leaders, and by the way, I don't think a lot of people would call Elon Musk a great leader. He's a great builder, he's a great founder, but that's different from leadership. And that's what we're talking about today. So you may know some unicorns out there like Elon Musk that doesn't do a lot of preparation, but instead just improvises and bulldozes their way into success. But those guys and gals are unicorns. So what I want us to take away from this is that preparation transforms opportunity into progress, right? That's what we all want to be, prepared. And by the way, that's where that confidence to lead comes from being prepared. So let's look at our third leadership principle. Vision gives people a reason to move. Vision gives people a reason to move. So let's go to Nehemiah chapter 2, and this is verses 11 to 18. So I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley gate to the dragon spring and to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, and I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. And that's the passage that I started us with today. So before he opened his mouth to the rest of the people who he would need to galvanize to do the work, before he built his team, he personally assessed the situation. So once he understood what the challenges were, and he and just a couple of people that he hand selected had gone under cover of night to do their inspection. You know why? They didn't want any interference. They didn't want anybody else's opinion. They wanted to do their assessment on their own. And then once he had done that, he was able to communicate a compelling vision. This is the law of buy-in, right? People have to buy into the leader before they buy into the leader's vision. So he did his homework. He knew what he was doing. And now, rather than people continually being discouraged, because if you remember, the guys that came back and gave him the report about how terrible things were, they were totally discouraged about it. Now he can help translate that discouragement to a shared purpose. Um, and so here's the truth. People don't commit to projects simply because there's work to be done. And I should have put this in there. Good people, the right people, the best people. Some people just show up to work. I don't know if you've ever had a job like that or you've ever had people who worked for you that were like that. They're there to do the minimum amount possible to get through what they needed to get through so they could get to Friday. That's not the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the good people. Good people don't commit to a project just because there's work to be done. By the way, those people are under the leadership of a level one leader who leads based on position. I'm talking about the right people, the best people. Good people commit when they understand why the work matters, why the work matters. So as a leader, you got to be able to communicate to your team a future that's worth pursuing. When people see that their contributions make a difference, it turns observers into owners. And I don't know about you. I don't want people following me who just want to do a task and then do the minimum possible to get done so they can move on. I want people who buy into the vision, who want to have an impact. So, this is the law of connection. The law of connection is when you truly have an impact on others who then help you make an impact into the marketplace, right? If we're talking about from a business perspective, there's been so much studies done of younger generations now who want to do business with companies who are making a difference, who want to work for companies who are making a difference. They don't want a job. They don't want just a job where what they do doesn't matter. And they want to just, again, get by with as little as possible so they can get to Friday and grab a beer with their buddies, right? They want to do something that's going to have an impact. On the John Maxwell team, we say we are people of value who add value to people who add value to others. And that's what we're talking about. We want observers to become owners. And that's what casting this strong vision is and making that connection with people. So, what's our takeaway here? People follow leaders who can clearly see and clearly communicate the destination. And this is what influence is. This is what influence is. This is what leadership is. Um, the there's something about understanding how to communicate your vision to other people that galvanizes them, that organizes them. Any, well, maybe not anybody, but a lot of people can get in front of a group and they can make a pitch, they can get some rah-rah going, they can get some cheerleaders going, and then get people to say yes to just about anything, right? History is replete with people who have fallen for a charismatic speaker and think that they're a charismatic leader. Um, I was listening to something recently and it was sort of discussing a little bit of what happens when people don't think, but they just blindly follow a leader. And one of the examples was um, Jim Jones. I can't remember the name of the cult. He was a charismatic leader. I don't know if he was in your generation, he was in mine, who formed a religious cult, and there was a mass suicide at his direction. I think it was thousands of people who actually killed their children and themselves because they followed him. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? That's not influence, because influence is the ability to affect the thoughts, behaviors, values, and actions of other people for the greater good. So that's what I'm talking about, ethical influence. So you got to be able to see the destination and then communicate that destination to your people. Again, going back to the law of navigation, anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Okay, so let's look at leadership principle number 4. Great leaders build teams, not just projects. And this is where the law of magnetism comes in, right? You're going to attract people that are like you. So I would not read this to you because Nehemiah chapter 3 is a very long laundry list of every single person, or leader, should I say, who is there building a section of the wall. Remember, this wall goes around the entire city of Jerusalem. And so this is the entire community working together. So, for example, the high priest and the priest begin by rebuilding the sheep gate. And so the way that chapter 3 reads, I would encourage you to at least skim it. It says next to them, then they list a group of people and what they're building, next to them, next to them, next to them. And it goes around the entire perimeter of Jerusalem. One group after another took responsibility and was accountable for one specific section of the wall. And this is everybody. So I've got a little recap here. We got civic leaders, craftsmen, merchants, goldsmiths, perfumers, family, daughters. Everybody's involved. How is it possible that Nehemiah was able to inspire and influence and then galvanize a very diverse group of people to all work together to get one thing done, and that is to protect the city of Jerusalem by rebuilding its walls? It's a beautiful portrait, and even if you're skimming it, just let your eyes rest on all those names and let it be inspiring to you and give you hope to think, what is the power of a group of people with common shared values? What are they able to do? I mean, I don't know if you're in the US. I am in the US right now in beautiful Ackworth, Georgia. But I think back to the 13 colonies, our founding fathers, and what they were able to do here on our 250th anniversary. We think about that, and it can sort of seem like this way distant past. But this was a very diverse. Our country is founded by a very diverse group of people. They are from all over Europe and beyond that are here with one common goal of building this republic. So it can be done. It can be done. And if it can be done at a national level, and if it can be done with this diverse group of people that had been living in exile for over 100 years, then it can be done on your team. Absolutely can be done on your team. There was only one group of nobles that just refused to help. But everybody else worked together with that unity and that purpose. This is clear organization, shared ownership, and coordinated effort. And what would have seemed like it was overwhelming was done. The beautiful thing about this was this is the city walls, the city gates that had lay in ruin for 120 years was rebuilt in 52 days. 52 days. That's phenomenal. Now, I don't know if you have any Bible nerd in you at all. I have a lot of Bible nerd in me, but numbers are very important in the Bible, and for the Jews, numbers were very important. So there's a story that happens in the New Testament where Jesus feeds the 5,000, and as if you know anything about the story, it's not 5,000 people; it's just 5,000 men. So when you add in the women and children, you're talking probably 20,000 people. And he fed that group of 5,000, aka 20,000, with five loaves and two fish. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. 52 days, 5 and 2, 52 days that wall was rebuilt. So this is, to me, one of the greatest organizational leadership chapters in Scripture. Like if you get discouraged about your team, and maybe your team is small. Maybe again, could be your family, could be your business, could be on your job, it could be, in your community, at your church. If you get discouraged about your team and maybe feel like not everybody is buying into your vision, go back and read Nehemiah, read these few chapters, and really be inspired of what's possible. But you got to remember the order in which he did it. So we'll circle back to that in a minute. Um, so remember, notice what Nehemiah did. Number one, he gave people ownership. Number two, he matched the responsibility to the people, right? Are you doing that? Are you doing that? Are you matching responsibility to the people? Total side pitch for DISC, for the DISC. That's a great way to make sure that the people on your team are doing the right job. It's based on their behavioral style. I had a coaching call last week with one of the salespeople on one of my clients' teams, and he's really struggling with sales. He's a high C on the disc, very analytical, detail oriented. And part of his job is to call people and just develop relationships. That does not come natural to him. And so he was very frustrated that he couldn't be like the team leader. She's a high I on the disc. That's all she wants to do is call and talk to people. So he was comparing himself to her, coming up short and trying to figure out what was wrong with him. So I was able to help him reframe that entire thing. And we found a way for him to become an expert in something using his analytical research skills and then using that to add value to other people. So that's what Nehemiah did. He matched the responsibility to the people, number two. Number three, he empowered people from different backgrounds to contribute. Like, who are the people you're overlooking? We talked about this maybe a session or two ago. Like, um, there's a lot of diversity just in what people have done, other jobs. What is their life experience? Where have they maybe led a volunteer team? What have they done in the past that could contribute? Are we just focused on the job description or the people fulfilling the job? Um, and then number four, he created a culture where everyone had a role in accomplishing the mission. I think about this, even this little lesson here with my daughter and son-in-law and their four children. We took them last weekend for a long weekend to the Great Wolf Lodge in Houston. If you have kids or grandkids, find a way to get to a Great Wolf Lodge. There's bunches of them all over the country. They're just these amazing indoor water parks. Super fun, great, inexpensive vacation to take the family on. But my daughter has a 12-year-old son, a 6 and 5-year-old sons, and a 3-year-old daughter. And honestly, things work best as a team for this family when she gives them ownership, when she makes sure that she's asking them for a chore or a task, that it's something that they would actually be good at, so they can build some confidence in that area, and that she considers how different they each are, and then culture. It's the culture that she's creating, so everyone knows they're helping to accomplish the mission. When she barks orders at them, they do what kids do. They resist. But when she creates a team, and we did that a few times, and everybody knew they had a job, they all began to step into a level of accountability and ownership. And there was a lot less wailing and gnashing of teeth and less spankings. In fact, there were none on the times that we did that. Don't judge my daughter for spanking her kids. She got spanked. So don't judge me either. Um, anyway, everyone needs to contribute to the vision. And so with Nehemiah, the project succeeded because everybody knew their role. So here's our leadership application. Effective leaders create clarity. Clarity. Clear is kind, right? So create some clarity around what it is you need your team to do, and then explain that to them, right? So you've got to be able to do those same things too. So when leaders develop people, it's not when they try to do everything themselves. That's when strong organizations are built. And that brings us to level 4 leadership, which is people development. People development. And I've taught on that multiple times so far this year in the 126 Collective. So if you've been tuning in, I should have made a note of which one of the sessions I focused a lot on level 4 leadership. But that's not when you're doing everything yourself, but when you're empowering them to lead as well. So leadership isn't measured by what you accomplish alone. It's by what your team accomplishes together. This can be tough for some of my clients, especially those in the real estate profession, when they feel like, they have to be the star of the show. Even if it's not an ego thing, they think that's what people expect, that they're sort of the one who's going to show up all the time. It's when you empower and equip, or let me reverse that. When you equip and empower other people to help you make an impact, now you're leading. Now you're leading, and now people are buying into you as the leader. That's level 4 leadership. All right. Last leadership principle for Nehemiah. Stay focused on the mission despite the noise. So I'm going to read one more section here, and this is from Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 19 through 20. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, "What is this thing that you were doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Then I replied to them, "The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem." So this is part of the group that begin to oppose Nehemiah. You can read further into Nehemiah and see that they plotted to sneak up essentially on all these people. Remember, they're all working on the wall at the same time, and they're going to sneak up and attack them and kill them and prevent them from rebuilding the wall. So Nehemiah faced a lot of criticism, a lot of skepticism and resistance, but he did not allow this to derail the mission. He stayed focused on the work. Here's his adaptation. He in some cases, and you can read this in Nehemiah, people had a hammer in one hand and a sword in another. Like they were ready as they're working to defend themselves. But he also posted sentries. So when people weren't working, they were watching posts and they had trumpets. So if they saw anybody coming at various parts around the wall, they could blow the trumpet and then the people could put down their tools and turn around and fight the opposition. He also made people stay, or I guess he, had them stay in the area rather than leave at night so that they would work 24/7. So while some were sleeping, some were working, some were watching the post, and they would just rotate that. So he made those adaptations. That's how that wall got built in 52 days. So he stayed focused on the work. So every significant initiative encounters resistance. You can better believe if you're not doing something that matters, no one's going to care. The minute you step forward and decide to do something that's going to make a difference, you will encounter resistance. That is, prove me wrong. If you have had a time where you were doing something very important that was going to add a lot of value to somebody somewhere and you got no resistance, put it in the chat. I'd like to hear about it because I don't think it happens that way. I think every significant initiative is going to encounter resistance. So, what do leaders do? They expect challenges, number one. Number two, they remain emotionally steady. And number three, they keep their teams focused on the mission, not the distraction. Not the distraction. It would have been very easy for those people to be working, stop their work, turn around and fight, go back to work. But literally, some of them worked with a hammer in one hand and a sword in the other, right? Staying focused on the mission, but ready, watchful, right? So they were expecting those things, but they stayed focused. So critics may influence your strategy, but they should never define your direction. I wish I had this handy. Go look it up. But it is the man in the arena, right? Who was that? Somebody popped out in the chat. Was that Churchill who spoke about, essentially that there's always going to be people on the sideline um, throwing out their opinion, a lot of chatter about what you should or shouldn't be doing. But God bless the man who's in the arena, who's bloodied and dirty because he's doing the fight. That's the guy or gal. I'll talk to you, right? If you've been in the arena and you've taken a risk and you've built a business or built a team or built something and failed and rebuilt it, I'm there. But if you're just on the sidelines, I'm not interested. So I'm not going to allow the critic to influence anything unless they too have been through it. So don't allow opposition to determine your focus. Let the mission do that. Let the mission do that. So let the mission determine your focus, not the critics, not the critics, especially if they've never done it. All right, so let's look within. And these are some questions I just want you guys to be thinking about this week. Okay, wait, I think I got one in the chat here. Theodore Roosevelt. Thank you, Danielle. Yep, that's right. Theodore Roosevelt. Go look it up. The man in the arena. So, what leadership challenge or opportunity have you been avoiding? And what's keeping you from addressing? right? Is there something you've been avoiding doing? And if so, what's keeping you from addressing it? Is it because you haven't taken enough time to prepare? Like we can go back to page one of our handout. I'm sorry, page two, right? Have you taken some time to prepare, to think about it, to think strategically, to come up with your plan? What's keeping you from addressing this challenge or this opportunity? Second question, how clearly have you communicated your vision to your team so they know the goal and they know their role? Is it time to sit down with your team and bring them back to a recollection of what your vision is, or teach them what it is for the first time? But if people can understand their role and why the work that they're doing matters, I promise you, you're going to have a greater level of influence than if you're leading from a positional level. Are you empowering others with meaningful responsibility, or are you trying to carry too much of the workload yourself? My brain is thinking right now to the session we did on Moses and Jethro, right? Moses was trying to hear the cases of every single Israelite, and his father-in-law came along and said, "What you were doing is not good. You've got to delegate to other people. Now, you've got to equip them, you've got to empower them, but you gotta be able to delegate. A lot of people think delegation is just I'm just going to give you a job to do and hope you do it. That's not how it works, right? Maybe if you just need your house cleaned or your grass cut. But if we're talking about building a business, you definitely want to equip and empower your people. Next question. What distractions, criticisms, or obstacles are competing for your attention? And how can you remain focused on your highest leadership priorities? Like, what's the noise out there? What are the distractions? Technology, people, coffee pot issues, personality conflicts, the news. I don't know what it is for you. Who's critiquing you? I had a conversation with a client last week. They're getting a lot of criticism from somebody who I'll use the word feedback, but it was really criticism. They're getting a lot of feedback from somebody who has no idea what's going on in their business. They don't know them that well, and they don't know the goal of the business. They're in a similar business, and so they're trying to tell them, you need to do this, and you should do that, and you have to do that. And I'm like, that person has not earned the right to give you that feedback. They're giving you an opinion, and you know what they say about opinions. So, what's competing for your attention? How do you get refocused? And then, which of Nehemiah's leadership qualities? Is it ownership? Do you need to take more ownership? Is it preparation? Is it vision? Is it team building? Is it perseverance? What is it? Which one of those would have the greatest impact on your leadership if you intentionally developed it this week? This week. So I hope you'll take some time to kind of think into these questions because I want you to take a step this week. I always want to leave you with a leadership challenge. So right now, think of one area of your leadership. It could be your business, it could be your family, it could be in your community that needs renewed direction, meaning you need to revisit this whole thing. And I want you to write it down. Make a commitment. Write down one area that you know you need to you need to be renewed in this week. And so this week, I'm going to invite you to take 5 steps towards that. I want you to spend intentional time, like underline that intentional time. Intentional time doesn't have your phone on or your emails up or your social media is up, your family's interrupting you. That's not intentional time. Intentional time where you can sit down, right? Gather the information you need, reflect, right? Reflect. John Maxwell says, experience isn't the best teacher, but evaluated experience can be a really great teacher. So reflect on what's happening and then prepare before you make a decision. Clearly define your destination and then write down 3 steps you need. The next 3 steps, it might be 10, but we only want the next three. The next 3 steps you need to take to move that forward. And then share that vision with one person or 2 people who can actually help you accomplish it. Remember, Nehemiah went to King Artaxerxes after he spent that intentional time gathering information, reflecting, and preparing. He knew the destination, he knew the resources he needed, and then he approached King Artaxerxes with his request, and it was very well laid out. Who is a key influencer that you can approach after you take these steps to ask them for some help? If it's people on your team, who is it? Share this with them. And then lastly, take one decisive action that will move the mission from planning to progress. So let's wrap it up here. Leadership is not defined by the position you hold. Remember, there's 5 levels of leadership. So level one is positional leadership. It's all about I'm the boss, so you got to do what I say. This is not what we're talking about here. Leadership is revealed by the problems that you're willing to own, the vision you're willing to cast, and the people you're willing to develop. So don't just manage what's in front of you. I want you to be able to chart the course and lead with intention. Um, because leadership isn't about getting people to follow you, it's about helping people move towards a better future together. Together. So that's our lesson on Nehemiah. I hope that's been inspiring to you. If you have some time, or if you want to make some time to go back and read those first few chapters of Nehemiah, I think you'll be really inspired by the way that he led. Now, when you get to the end, sorry, Nehemiah's a human. He screws it up. He screws it up. But this part of his life, well, I guess the good news there is none of us are perfect and we're all going to make mistakes, but it's how we lead in the moment and how you lead in the moment that's going to make the biggest difference. So thanks so much for tuning in from I'm saying goodbye from Ackworth, Georgia. When I post this, I'm gonna post some pictures of this beautiful park we found. And I don't know where I'll be next time, but I'll let you guys guess. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week. Bye.